Hi everyone, welcome to another Memory Keeping Monday. I'm Lisa Truesdell, a garden girl at twopieceinabucket.com, and I'll be sharing my process of building a layout from start to finish. This week I want to talk about making a page using a grid design. When you think of using a grid, you probably expect to see the elements all lined up in neat rows. A grid can give you a good base to build your layout from and is one of my favorite starting points for a page. Today, I'm going to show you how to take that basic design and break it to mix up the orderly rows to make a more dynamic design. Before we get into that, I want to give you a look at the products I'll be using this week. I started by pulling the multicolored paper from the new basic gray clippings line. You can see it towards the center of the photo. From there, I brought in lots of aquas and neutrals. They set the perfect tone for my lake photos. I loved the red in the basic gray paper, so I grabbed a couple of embellishments that would bring it in as an accent. I turn to grids a lot when I'm working with multiple photos. For today's page, I have two square Instagrams and one photo taken with my real camera. I opted to print them all at different sizes. Each photo has its own feel due to differences in lighting when they were taken, and the size variation helps emphasize that. I trimmed down my smallest photo and am adding it to a Dear Lizzie chipboard Polaroid to add a little dimension to the mix as well. I always start a design like this by placing my largest photo on the page, since I'll want it to be the focal point. I usually place it off center. It gives the page a bit more energy than just placing it in the middle of the layout. At this point, I'll start moving my other photos around and playing with different placements. If I wanted to do a straight grid, I'd line them up so that their edges all met along the same lines. It's a good, basic design, but you'll see if I start to move the photos so they break those grid lines, the layout becomes more dynamic. This photo placement is okay, but I want to try one more thing. All of my photos have fairly strong horizon lines, and I want to try and use that to my advantage. If I switch up these two small photos, you'll see that the horizon line from my main photo continues into the one next to it. This is a great way to keep the eye moving around the page. The only problem is that this design puts a small photo along the center line of the layout, which is a bit awkward. If I move everything over to the right, it feels more balanced. Now that I've got my photos placed, the rest of the page should come together easily. Now that my photos are placed, I'm ready to start filling in the layout. I'm starting with a little section of a banner. This one is from the basic gray clippings line. These banners come in a 12 by 12 sheet with lots of different patterns and sizes. I'm adding it along the bottom of my focal photo. I'm following the line along the bottom of the image instead of the white border. Since the border recedes into the background, the line where the photo ends is much stronger visually and a better place to add an embellishment. Next, I'm adding a small piece of patterned paper. I've cut a rectangle that will fill the height alongside my photo. I've also got a little bit of ledger paper that I'll add journaling to later. This will line up with my smaller photo, but break the grid by going below the bottom of the focal photo. I want to use the horizon line on my top photo as a guideline for where I'll place my title. I'm using these Studio Calico mistable thickers today. I love that I can customize them to match any layout. I want to stay neutral with these, so I'll be using Mr. Huey in Pinstripe. I put the letters for my title into my misting box, and I'll spray them 3 to 4 times from about 8 inches away. The fabric on these thickers takes a bit longer to dry than paper, so give them a couple of minutes to do that before you add them to your page. I'll be using this ampersand badge from October Afternoon as part of my title. I've placed it so that it's centered on the horizon in the photo. I'm adding the top row of letters so that they're along that same line, and my bottom row will line up with the bottom of the actual photo. Here's a closer look at the title on my finished page. It's a little easier to see how I followed the lines from my photo and how I reinforced those lines with stitching. With all the major elements in place, it's time to turn to some smaller details. I'm adding a dark blue chevron pattern paper to the bottom of the page to help ground it, and I'll add a lighter aqua border to the top. Next, I'll add some stamping. This little arrow stamp is the perfect size to continue the line from the bottom of my journaling block. I'm using gray ink here to bring in the same color as my title. I found a phrase stamp that says, "The time of my life," on a set of sentiments from Studio Calico, and I love how that fits with the theme of my page. I'll just stamp it up along the top border of the layout. The last stamped image will be a fun arrow stamp from my mind's eye. This is a good basic image that I find myself using over and over. If you go through my recent pages in the two-piece garden, you'll see it pop up again and again. I added my dates to the journaling block with this Dear Lizzie stamp. I took advantage of the different phrases and images and used a few of them here. Now I'll start embellishing the page with this sticker from October afternoon. I'll add it right under my top photo, then use some washi tape over that. The yellow will add a pop of color, but it won't be overwhelming since the tape is transparent. Next, I'll add this heart from Dear Lizzie and a chipboard ticket from Basic Gray. These two embellishments will form a visual triangle with the chipboard Polaroid we added at the beginning of the page. I left an awkward little bit of space trapped between my focal photo and my title, and I want to use a strip of washi there. It's light enough that it won't draw attention to itself, but it will do the job of filling in that empty space. I'm also going to add a couple of brads to the layout, one alongside the chipboard ticket and another next to the heart. These will make a visual triangle along with the badge and the title and help draw the eye around the page. If you think back to the kit photo I shared earlier, you'll notice that I didn't use many of the patterned papers. I decided to try and get them all onto the page. I added one to the top border and a bit of wood grain along the bottom. 2 papers fill in the space beside my journaling, and I added a tiny strip alongside this block. I was happy to call this page done before I added these, but I really like the extra pattern and color that adding them brought to this layout. When you look at the finished page, you can see that the pattern paper block lines up with the top of my photo, which lines up with the horizon in the next photo. This divides my page in half, and my elements are balanced above and below this line. These 2 pattern paper blocks are the same width as my photo, and if you look to the top of that picture, you'll see that it lines up with the horizon line in the small photo as well as the title. Even though none of my elements are on a strict grid, it's definitely there, and it helps to draw all these elements together into a design that makes sense. Thanks for joining me today. I hope I've inspired you to try making and breaking a grid on your next page. Look for strong lines in your photos and in the elements you're adding to your layout, and see where it takes you. Happy scrapping, and I hope you'll come back next week for another Memory Keeping Monday at 2peasinabucket.com.